JumpSearch Talent Show.
Tony, thank you for joining us today here at the JumpSearch Talent Show. I really appreciate you spending some time. I know you and I, a few weeks ago, had an amazing conversation, and in many ways, I wish we kind of recorded it back then. But I think we're going to cover a lot of the similar topics that we discussed back then and maybe go a little bit deeper. And for my guests out there, or my audience out there, today's guest is Tony Perlingieri. Did I get that right, Tony?
You got my last name correct, Eric. Thank you.
Awesome. Tony's a seasoned HR leader and a chief people officer with nearly 3 decades of experience guiding startups and high-growth companies in global enterprises. He's led people strategy across industries like FinTech, healthcare, manufacturing, e-commerce, and retail, driving transformation through rapid scaling and culture building initiatives. A top 50 HR Pro award winner and SHRM SCP, Tony has delivered multi-million-dollar savings, launched leadership academies, expanded DEI programs, and built talent systems that boost retention and business results. Today, through his work as fractional CPO, he helps organizations with HR audits, succession planning, org design, total reward strategies. And Tony brings a practical, battle-tested perspective on HR paired with a passion for DEI, employee engagement, and the evolving role of AI in the workspace. So with all that, Tony, welcome. Would love for you to fill in any of the gaps of anything I might have missed there.
Well, Eric, thank you very much for the warm welcome and for bringing me onto your podcast. As I was listening to all this, I'm thinking, is that really me? But I guess it is. Anyway, hello, everybody. I'm Tony Perlingieri, as Eric mentioned. I've been a senior HR business leader for about 28 years. I've had the opportunity to work for 5 different organizations that have been very, very different industries. As Eric has alluded to, I've had the opportunity to work in manufacturing operations and supply chain, management consulting. I've worked for startup, medium-sized, large organizations, global organizations, and most recently I worked for a FinTech organization, which is new. And one of the things I think I'll speak to today a little bit, Eric, if I may, and chat a little bit about is I do think that whenever you have the opportunity to work for very diverse industries, you're going to benefit tremendously because when you are in the transformative war room with your senior leaders in your organization, having a very diverse industry background gives you a very different perspective than you have a very narrow perspective. Not that there's anything wrong with working in one industry, but I think when you have a tendency to do that, maybe some of your strategies and your vision tend to be a little bit less broader than when you work for, multiple different industries. So I wanted to start off there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Do you feel like, let's just dive right into that. Do you feel like what the market is valuing is evolving? Right? I think historically we've seen the market employers really value specialized, deep, narrow experience and skill sets. Do you feel like that's evolving to valuing people that bring more of a broader versus more of a general kind of experience and tool set?
Yeah, I think, that's really a great question. I would answer it with, and I know this is a little vague, but I would answer it actually with a yes and a no, and I'll explain why. I think that the market has shifted to, I think most CEOs and senior people want to get individuals that have a broader background from a couple of different industries. But this has also happened to me on a personal level as I've been engaged for opportunities at a, chief people officer, chief HR officer role, where I've heard things from either executive recruiters or companies like, hey, you've got great background, but you don't have this industry. How are you going to overcome that? So I do think that human resources roles, financial roles in particular, I just kind of narrowing it down to those 2 functional areas just for the moment. I do think that people in the finance world and also in the HR world, our expertise is very transferable to almost any industry. And while, yes, it's always great if you can have that industry background because it just makes it a little bit easier from a learning curve perspective and a transition perspective. But the reality is smart people can learn any industry. And, regardless of even if you've come from that industry, when you come into the company, you still have to learn that culture. You still have to learn what's important to the C-suite and the CEO, and it's what's important to the employees. So, you could take all that experience and kind of throw it out the window a little bit because in the end, you still have to learn that particular business anyway you slice the dice. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So, Tony, you're in the mix, right? You're working with a number of different companies. You're seeing sort of this evolution in HR in real time, and I'm curious, like, what trends are you seeing, and what are driving some of these trends? And how are companies adapting? What does that look like right now?
Sure. I'll answer it in a couple of different ways, Eric, if I may, and then I'll kind of speak to each of it. One is definitely employee engagement and retention and recognition programs. One is career ladders. Another area is succession planning. And the last, which I think every one of us talk about probably almost every 5 minutes of the day, is AI in some capacity. So maybe I'll start from the beginning and kind of work backward if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about employee engagement. So I do think that one of the mistakes that some companies make is that they focus so much on their employee surveys and don't know really what to do with it. Like, okay, well, we got the survey information. That's great. So have we done an analysis? Like, what are the takeaways? What are the strategies? What is the racking and stacking of what we think is important? Have we shared that with our C-suite and our senior CEO to determine like where we think we want to spend our time focusing on, from a strategy or a committee perspective? I happen to be an advocate of surveys, but I'm much more of an advocate, frankly, of real-time focus group meetings. I do think focus group meetings are very, very important because you have real-time conversations with employees from across the organization. When you do a survey, typically you ask 7, 8, 9, 10 questions, and you're going to get obviously responses, which are kind of like an A, B, C, D, maybe even if you offer a little bit of a miscellaneous section, but you're not really going to get a breadth of understanding like what really people are thinking. And then, of course,
Yeah.
when people answer questions, it's how they interpret their questions, right?
It's filtered.
Right, it's filtered. But when you have a focus group meeting and you're going into it, like, typically always ask people to talk to us about what are the things that you really want to talk about. And also, we also are prepared to talk about maybe 2, 3, or 4 things that we want to ask as well. But I have found that the focus group meetings are incredibly insightful. You can make it a lot of fun, but you're also talking about a lot of things that are of particular interest to the employees. And then what you do is you take all the data that you get for the focus group meetings, and then you do a side-by-side comparison to what you've learned from the employee surveys and see if there's an alignment or if there's a disconnect. My experiences have been is that the focus group meetings tend to be a little bit more in depth than the employee surveys are, and maybe a little bit different. So you take the two pieces of information and then you roll up all the information from the survey and the focus group meeting and kind of do a high level overview of this is what we learned from the surveys. This is what we learned from the focus group meetings. Here's where the differences are. And here's where we think we need to really spend maybe the next 6 months to a year and a half focus on. And we always have to remember when you get employee feedback, sometimes there's a cost impact involved, right? And, we can't necessarily do everything. So it's important, I think, for the organization to doing a racking and stacking of what the strategies are and where do we think what are the 2 or 3 things that we really want to focus on over the next year that we think will have the greatest impact, and then articulate that to the workforce. Like, hey, this is what we heard from you. This is where we're going to spend our time. The other things that we came up with are also equally important, but we're going to probably defer that to next year. So here are the things so that this way people feel like, wow, you know what? The time that I invested on a survey or a focus group meeting has really been listened to. So I'm going to pause there just for a minute. I wanted to share that first with you.
That was great. And I was wondering if there's an evolving sort of third channel, which is, I've always been amazed at how much insight and data might be able to be pulled out of sort of interactions that are not necessarily monitored, right? When you think about interactions through email or through Slack, now we have this amazing thing called AI that can start to connect the dots across a vast amount of data in a qualitative way that maybe we weren't able to do even just a few years ago. And I'm wondering if that could be a third source of like just getting sort of insights around how people are behaving, what morale might look like, any trends in morale, for example, or things like that. Is that an emerging sort of third channel, perhaps, to understanding employee and culture and organization?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, Eric. And as a matter of fact, in my most recent last organization, we took a lot of that data and then we did use AI to be able to do a lot of the analytics. And by the way, in the past, we would typically take all of that analytics and we would source it out to a third party, and then they would kind of do the analysis and then they would come back to us. Now we're doing it internally, which is not only a great cost savings, but now we're actually able to control kind of our own destiny based upon utilizing the AI and then having the AI process being able to, manifest all the analytics into sort of a metrics recommendation.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Are there any platforms out there that you feel are sort of that you would recommend? So for companies out there that are looking to tease out insights from, some of these from this emerging channel, are there any platforms out there that you feel like would be a good starting point?
Yeah, I would say there was a third party that I've used. There's two things. One, I've used a tool that we use for our performance management tool. It's called Lattice. I'm sure it's very familiar.
Okay.
Lattice. Lattice is a great tool to utilize for a couple of things. One, it's a performance management tool. They have a grow section. They have a rewards and recognition section, but they also are able to do surveys, and it's all embedded in the systems. Yes, that would be one tool. So if you happen to have Lattice, you have to make sure that you are speaking to the rep to get that particular product because, everything has like a different product and a product cost
Yeah.
when you use Lattice, but you can, kind of take out all of that. I've also utilized People Element. It's one of the vendors I've used in the past. People Element has been very useful in doing a lot of our survey metrics in the past. And I have to say they've done a really good job with analytics, and the rep that I happened to partner with in the past was excellent.
Okay.
And then now, from an AI perspective, there's one or two organizations that I've just built a new relationship with that I've started working with, and I'd be more than happy to speak to that. After this meeting is over, there is a Israeli-based business that has an AI focus, and they are focused on doing these kinds of metrics analysis, but both globally and also in the U.S.
Okay. No, awesome. That's great. And then Tony, just sticking here with employee engagement.
Yeah.
Is the objective for leaders of an organization to really just understand where their teams and their talent are at, such that they can help to really empower and enable them? That's really is that really the point of employee engagement?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces here, Erica. One is I do think you always need to take a look every year at what your retention rate looks like, right? What's the
Hmm.
attrition look like in the
Yeah.
organization? Are certain departments having heavier turnover than others? Are certain supervisors or leaders having more turnover than others? And if they are, how do we jump in and help those leaders become better managers or better leaders so that this way
Hmm.
they can, retain a lot, their employees? So I think that's one piece. Like some companies may feel like, oh, we don't have a retention issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have high employee engagement just because you
Hmm.
have low turnover. Because, the point is that are we really getting into the nitty gritty of what the culture and what employees are really thinking? So, but I would tell you that generally, a lack of employee engagement is generally synonymous with turnover or high turnover. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, everything is perfect. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. So next, career ladders. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, I always say that, and I've talked to you about this the last time, I call this the four-headed monster. What do I mean by that? The four-headed monster is you really need to have a good performance management program in place. You need to be able to have job descriptions for every single job in the organization. If you're going to do career ladders, you absolutely have to have job descriptions for every single job in the company. You also need to have an understanding of what does your ratings look like, whatever your ratings are, whether it's 1 to 5, 5 to 1, whatever it is.
Hmm.
They are all interconnected because career ladders and succession planning are really tied together. So what do I mean by career ladders? I do think that organizations talk about it, but don't necessarily do a particularly great job with it all the time because they recognize they have to have job descriptions for every single job and you have to make sure that they're up to date. But there are other pieces is what's the skill set? What's the competency of each career ladder? So first of all, you need to understand what does the departmental career ladder look like going from like A to Z?
Hmm.
Secondly, what's the competency that's tied to the job? What is the skill set that is tied to that particular job? And then also career ladders should have what I call an organizational competency, which is important. Like, how does that organizational competency, like a core value, what core values does your company have? And build that into the career ladders as well. So, and I think sometimes mistakes happen, like things happen very myopically within the department. Like, well, that's great. We have a career ladder in the department. That's great. But like, what are the expectations that you expect, from an organizational perspective related to the career ladders, in terms of what's your core values, like, respect in the workplace, what's our customer value look like? Are our employees embodying that? Do our employees work really well cross-functionally? If that happens to be a core value, which by the way, many companies do, it's not enough just to be able to work within your own department and siloed oriented. It's also important to understand like how are people operating from a cross-functional perspective. So career ladders is very, very critical, and it's a very time-consuming process. I could tell you that I've implemented that in 3 different organizations. And it's been incredibly worthwhile, really important. And here's what I would say to you, Eric. When an employee starts in the company and they go through onboarding, one of the first questions every new hire, doesn't matter what level they're at, they're going to ask is, what's next for me? And it's really great when you can open up the career ladder overview and say, well, you happen to be working in the risk department, saying that as an example. Here's what your career trajectory could look like if you come into the organization. It could be along the management career ladder, or it could be along the technical career ladder, depending upon what you want. And I think it's really important from a career ladder perspective, especially on the technical side, is not everybody wants to be a manager. So why force people to go into management? It's okay to push people out of their comfort zone. I think that's okay. But I also think it's important that people understand that I don't have to be a leader to be successful or to make more money. And the old way to think about it used to be, well, if you don't go into management, you can't get ahead. Well, that is just very, very backward looking, because not everybody wants to be a leader and not everybody wants to learn how to be a leader. Some people are natural born leaders.
Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, I do think that there's a very important place for career ladders. And then if it's okay with you, I'll jump ahead. It's tied very much to succession planning.
Yeah.
So it's really important to identify who are the high potentials in your company, who are the people that are on a fast track, including people that maybe just joined the company. And what were their ratings like? What was goes back to performance management. What were their ratings like? And then also, who are the people in the company that are solid, but maybe they're not high potential, and how do we continue to work on them? So here's the perfect example of what I would call succession planning. Let's say you've got a brand new division in your company that's evolving, and the person who takes that role is maybe a division president or a general manager. Maybe they need to have extensive background, maybe in sales or finance, but maybe their background has only been in marketing. And I'm just using this as an example. I would want to maybe put that individual into a sales role or a finance role for a period of 6 to 9 months to kind of round out their background so that they understand a little bit more about that part of the business, because the last thing you want to do is not set people up for success. If you're going to put somebody into a much bigger role and their potential high potential, what are we doing from a skill set perspective to set the person up for success? I do think that the education, the learning and development pieces, that's where that comes in, so that people can take classes internally or they can go online internally. You need to have some sort of a library so that people can continue to take classes at their own speed or go for certifications to continue to enhance their education. This is all an integral part of career development, career ladders, but it's all very much associated with succession planning. And without giving up the secret sauce, Eric, so to speak, on the succession planning piece is the way that you do it basically is that you do succession planning by department. And then when each department is done, then the senior HR leader should be facilitating a large session with the CEO and all the C-suite. And then we do kind of a grandiose overview of like, we're going to go through marketing. We're going to go through sales. We're going to go through finance. We're going to go through HR. We're going to go through technical. We're going to go through IT. We're going to go through merchandise, like whatever your business is. And everybody has an opportunity to see the ratings and who the key people are in the organization. And why is that important? Because using a baseball analogy, just for a minute, if you've got a key player who happens to be in the minor leagues, but they're blocked by like somebody at first base, how are we going to get that person elevated to the major leagues? But we know that we can't put them into first base. So the question is, how can we prepare that person cross-functionally and maybe move that person to another area of the business? And are they interested in that so that we can prepare them for success? And then the other piece is a common mistake that a lot of companies have made. This was years ago. I think a lot of companies have really improved in this area. People would do succession planning and they'd keep it all in the vault. It was like Secret Service. Like nobody ever knew who the key people were in the organization or high potential. So it is really important to tell your key people, hey, we view you as a key person in the organization. Here's where we envision you over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. We want to make sure we set you up for success. There is no crystal ball. It's all contingent upon performance. There is no guarantees for everybody. People have to perform. But if you continue to perform the way you've been performing, this is kind of like where we see you going. Is this an area of interest of yours? And let's talk about that. So I do think when a manager is having one-on-one meetings with their employees, not just at review time, but through the year, I'm a very strong advocate. Like if you're having one-on-one meetings, whether it's biweekly, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, when you meet with your folks, half hour, 45 minutes, take maybe 15, 20 minutes to talk about what's going on in the business, and then take the rest of the time to talk about at least once a month, how are you doing? What's your IDP look like? What's your individual development plan looking like? How are you progressing against that? How can I help you? Where are we going with this? Are you achieving the results that we've been talking about? So I know that's a very, very long overview answer, but I do think it's very complex. It's not one dimensional, but I think if you're doing all the things that I just mentioned, that's how you create some really good career ladders and succession planning.
I mean, career ladders. Oh, by the way, is career ladders a trademark term, or is that just sort of a
more generic?
It's more generic. Okay.
Yeah.
So this career ladders approach or framework, it feels like, it's sort of the growth mindset, but extended to an organization in terms of focusing on creating pathways of development and growth and mapping that to how somebody can have a path within their organization. And I guess one of my questions, Tony, is what have you seen as sort of the headwinds for companies to adopt or implement this?
I think that part of it is the senior HR leadership partnership with C-suite and also with the CEO to articulate to the company that our goal is internal promotion and career development. So like philosophically, people have to understand that is our goal as a company, right? So that's the first piece. Now, there's that old expression, guys, say what you mean and mean what you say. If you're going to say that, then you have to have a process and you have to have strategies that are in place that back that up. Otherwise, it loses the value and it diminishes the impact to the business. But again, going back, I think part of it is, some companies call it career pathing, some companies call it career ladders. I mean, it's all the same. But in the end, even if a company doesn't have the financial support to use like a lattice or another tool, you could still do spreadsheets. I mean, it's very archaic, but you could still do spreadsheets. Like, in terms of like back in the day, earlier career, before we had these tools, I did succession planning with career ladders with my team. And we had like these massive spreadsheets and, we had six spreadsheets, one for this department, one for this department. And it was a lot of work and a lot of manual work, but it did work. But in the end, you certainly want to utilize some sort of a tool. Can you use AI to do it? Yeah, absolutely. Which really, kind of increases, the efficiency here. So I do think things like career ladder, succession planning, performance management. I think if you're even utilizing an AI tool, all these things just make everything just so much more simple and so much more efficient. You just have to pick the right tool and decide, how is it, in fact, that you're going to use it. But I do think that not having those two strategies in place in every company, even if you're a scaling company, it inhibits your ability to retain people because people want to know what's next for me. That is the common question. And if you don't figure that out, someone else is going to give it to them.
Yeah. As a recruiter, that's one of the things that we use to entice people, right? Is giving them a clear sort of progression in terms of their career.
Yes.
A lot of times I end up talking with folks and they've been there, let's say, for a few years in the same position. Like, what do you imagine being next for you? And why haven't you achieved it there? Right. If we can sort of dangle that in front of them, they're very open to making a transition. Whereas their current company could be doing that. But for some reason or another, it's just not happening. So could we shift gears here a little bit, Tony? I want to talk a little bit about the future of work, right? You're immersed in HR. You're building these systems to really put people and teams on a high probability alignment to achieve success for themselves as well as for their organization. What do you see as evolving in what the future of work might look like, especially in light of AI and agents and the evolving sort of, we as humans are now competing with this software, this technology that can do a lot of what we used to do. So what are you seeing as sort of the trajectory in terms of what the future of work is looking like and what companies are valuing? What is that looking like?
Well, I will say this maybe just as a general statement, Eric. Obviously, we don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years from now, but I can at
Yeah.
least tell you maybe what it looks like today. I do think that there is a little bit of panic by people who think that AI is going to replace the workforce or they're going to replace their jobs. No one really knows what that may look like 5 or 10 years from now. But what I would say is if you're effectively leveraging AI tools and strategies, it really can supplement all the tools or processes that you have. In some cases, you're going to increase your efficiency, which is the ultimate approach, so that things become a lot less manual. There are certain things like, yeah, you could do an AI for interviewing, but do you really want to be interviewed by an AI, or would you really rather be interviewed by like a real person?
Yeah.
Because how else do you build a relationship with somebody like during the interview process? I'm just using that, like as an example. But that said, I would tell you that more companies seem to be moving in the direction, in some cases, forcing it on their workforce to come back to the office at least 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah.
We all know that working remote certainly works. We learned that during COVID, right? And post-COVID. But I would tell you that there's been a shift. It went from everybody was working remote during COVID, but for obvious reasons, to now we're going to do hybrid, which means we're putting our big toe in the shallow end of the pool. We're not ready to go full time yet, but we're going to kind of see how it works with the complement or balance of like remote and also office. Then you have the other challenge where you've got people who are not just technical people, but people who are working for your company who are nowhere close to any of your locations or operations, and therefore where are they going to operate from? So their only choice, of course, is to be able to operate remotely.
Mhm.
So if you're smart as a company, you want to create as many either monthly or quarterly meetings to kind of bring people into the office, have team building sessions, have working sessions together so that we're building a relationship. Because I happen to be as progressive as I am about everything. I'm a little old school about FaceTime. I happen to be more of a face-to-face person, water cooler kind of person. I don't see how you build a relationship from a screen. I'll never really understand that. I mean, not 100% of the time. I do think that you can do that once you have that relationship with people. But if that is your exclusive way to communicate with each other, it's really hard to get to know somebody other than what you're looking at a screen a couple of days a week or a couple hours a week. So now I'm starting to see a shift where, and I'm sure you follow it on LinkedIn or you follow it in the press. There are a lot of even medium-sized, not just large companies that have now started to shifting where they want people back in the office 4 or 5 days a week. And now they're doing less hybrid and more office time. So I think it all depends. And then I think it also has nothing to do with the age of a CEO. I think it has to do with their outlook, their wisdom, how they vision things. There are, I think, CEOs who are very progressive and believe, yeah, hybrid absolutely works. Or, yeah, we're a complete remote company. We're going to continue to be remote until such time we have to go hybrid. And then there are other CEOs and senior leaders that believe, hey, you know what? If you're not coming in the office, I don't know what you're doing. So I want to see it, which is a bit antiquated and archaic, but that's the way they look at things, whether it's right or wrong. But most of the people that feel that way are also people that very much believe in the FaceTime partnership every single day.
Yeah.
But listen, even when you're having tough conversations with people, it's very hard to do it virtually. It really is.
Yeah.
And, unless you can, hey, Frank, you got 5 minutes, let's go in the conference room and chat. And then you have that conversation. And it just doesn't always resonate with people as well virtually as when you're having those tough conversations, especially when it's a performance related conversation. And people should feel like things should be very adult. That's the best way I can say it. Like let's all be adults with each other. There are going to be times we have disagreements. There are going to be times that we're not all performing exactly what we need to, but you really want to have a tough conversation with somebody unless you have no other choice by not doing it in person. So I do think that, yes, more companies have definitely shifted to at least hybrid, but more companies have been starting to bring people back in the office at least 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of, you and I talked about this last time, but this sort of evolution, or I don't know if it's a trend, I don't know if it's a something that is fleeting, but it feels like there's a movement towards, or maybe away from W-2 work to more gig type work, or in some cases they call it fractional kinds of work. And then you and I talked a little bit about sort of transitioning from this idea of series W-2 work to fractional or consulting work to like maybe multi-revenue stream kinds of work. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing there. Like what are some of the drivers that might be influencing people to take on more kinds of fractional work? Is this something that is market driven, or is it more a function of maybe technology that might be influencing this, or the rate of innovation? What are your thoughts on sort of fractional work and how it's evolving?
So it's a great question. I do think that there's a good, bad, and an ugly to the question that you asked. So I'll try to be as maybe
Yeah.
as clear as possible because I think there's a couple of different perspectives. I think the word fractional is far more receptive and embraced by people than the word consultant for some reason. It's almost like being a consultant. It's a dirty word. I don't really understand that because frankly, it's one and the same. But it's all about how you articulate it, right? So here's what I would say. For people who are in transition, and we know that there are millions of people that are, a couple of things. One, I encourage people to pursue fractional work. I think it could be very, very rewarding. You could be an LLC, but you can be a 1099. You don't necessarily have to be an LLC. The benefit of being an LLC, and I would just say this from my own personal experiences, because I have been an LLC in the past, is that it legitimizes your business. And when you're a 1099, it almost gives the company an impression that maybe you're in this transient state. But when you're an LLC, like, wow, you have like a real business. And it doesn't mean that, by the way, you have to have business where you've got several people working for you. It's just that it legitimizes. You went through the effort, you went through the cost, you created a business, you created a legitimate business and a name and a model. And also you probably have multiple clients that you're working with in whatever capacity, whether you're doing technical, HR work, finance work, marketing work, whatever you're doing. Here's what I am seeing in today's market. I think a lot of organizations have, because of the market and because of the economy, they need senior HR leaders in their company, Eric, but they don't have the budget to hire the chief this or the chief that. So instead, they would hire a chief fractional person who has the expertise, doesn't have to pay the benefits to that person, can still pay, very good compensation in terms of whatever the deal is on the partnership. And it could still be very rewarding to the person who's in the role. And there's always a possibility that the person could transition from a fractional work to a regular FTE W2 employee, which, by the way, is a great way for the person doing the fractional work to see what that culture is all about.
Yeah.
I've heard stories from people like, oh my Lord, I'm so happy that I did fractional work because I would never want to work for that company as a W2 employee, right? But I've also heard reverse the same thing, like I love this company and that was the reason why I chose to transition over. I do think that when you do fractional or consulting work, the benefit of it is that it keeps you in the game. It keeps you stimulated. It keeps you inspired. And of course, as always, you're making money. The other piece is it forces you to get up every day and take a shower and go to work. And what does that mean? Whether it's you're going to work to your computer in your office, home office, or whether you're going to an office, wherever your company is, or you're traveling to an office. The point is that it's keeping you engaged, it's keeping you inspired. I have had this conversation with so many of my friends and colleagues and even some family members. If you're sitting home all day long and just applying for jobs on LinkedIn, and that's all you're doing, you can literally jump out the window because that is not a healthy approach. One, chances are you may get 0 responses or very few. So the method that you really want to accomplish is networking is the key way between your referrals and your large network to land fractional work or land new positions. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't get on LinkedIn or whatever the app is that you're using for new positions. I think you should do that because I think you just want to do that as part of your due diligence. But the best way you're going to land a job is going to be through networking and through referrals. That's where I have landed almost all of the jobs in my career has been through people who've known me or referred me, or just because of the fact I did fractional work for them and then they wanted to bring me on as their full-time regular employee. That has been what, has been primarily successful for me in the past. But I worry about people who are, posting for jobs, working from home every single day. They get up early, they stay late, and they're on that computer every time they see another job and they post for a job. That is a maddening process. It's also not mentally healthy because it doesn't get you out of the house. It doesn't give you the opportunity to interact with other people. So when you have the opportunity to go to networking meetings, a lot of people are not necessarily extroverts, don't necessarily enjoy doing it. You have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. I always say when I go to a networking meeting, I go into it with zero expectation. And I always come out with something, whether I met somebody who was interesting, or maybe I got a lead, or maybe there's an opportunity, but I never go in with any expectation so that this way, you're not necessarily disappointed.
Yeah.
So wherever it is that you can, whether it's a virtual online meeting, whether it's virtual meetings in person, or conferences or industry meetings that you can go to, whether you learn about them in magazines or whatever it is, and again, trying to be as cost effective as you wherever you can. I just can't say this enough about people. I just had this discussion with a very good friend of mine this last week. She has been doing this for almost a year, and I dissected with her and I said to her, what are you actually doing? And she told me exactly what I just told you, Eric. And I said, that is a maddening process. No wonder you're depressed. I'm depressed just listening to it. So I can imagine
She's been in the job search for 12 months.
For 12 months.
Wow.
And she has gotten now she's gotten to the point where at this point she feels she's unemployable. Not that anybody said that to her, but that's how she feels. Now, here's what I'm going to say, and this may not be popular to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I think it's important to say.
Yeah.
I do think in this market, for people who are in transition, I think that women have a tendency to handle it a lot better than men. And I'm going to explain why. Women multitask. They have kids to take care of. They've got a household that they need to run. And they're not, of course, they're thinking about their job search, but they're also doing other things. Men, not that they're not running a household, or they could be a single parent, but, and I speak from personal experience, we have a tendency as men to associate our career with our worth as opposed to women. And when you think that you're not doing a good job, or you're adding zero value because you're not making $250,000 or $300,000 anymore, or whatever you're making, and you've been out of work for a while, you now feel that your worth is not what you think it used to be. And I know that that is very sad commentary, and that's where the mental health comes in. And I worry for people that look at it that way. So I have those kind of conversations with people all the time to try to do what I can to just remind them that they were very successful in the past, that they can't define themselves based on their job. But I know for a fact that most men do.
Yeah, it's very common. I've worked with a lot of job seekers, and one of the things that I've suggested to help people get out of that rut is to really take a inventory of their experience and sort of relive their successes. And it puts their body and their mind and their soul in a place of, wow, I did do that. I did accomplish that, and it puts them in sort of a winning mindset. Because when you've been banging on the doors for 6, 9, 12, even 18 months in some cases with very little progress or anything to show for it, it does get people, it rewires their brain a little bit, And so it's a tough thing to sort of get out of, but that's one of the things I really do to try to encourage folks. What is the difference between a job seeker mindset versus a fractional mindset? I mean, you talked a little bit about networking, but is there a difference in the motion, in the mindset? How would you sort of describe that, Tony?
Yeah, I think that this kind of goes back to what I was just talking about for the last couple of minutes, which is, the philosophy about the definition of insanity. You can't continue to keep doing the same things and expect a different result. So if clearly you've been banging the doors, to your point, for the last 6 months to a year, and nothing is working, it's not going to change unless you make a change. One area is go volunteer. When you when you add value either in your community, or if there's some specific thing that you're particularly interested in, great networking vehicle. It's not necessarily about it that it's going to lead you to another job, but it re-inspires you. And now that you're around other people, it just gives you a sense of, you know what, I think things have been tough for me, and they have been, but I just looked at this person and boy, you know what, my life is not so bad after all. And here I'm actually helping and adding value to other people, right? So I do think the volunteering piece, I think really, makes difference. And I've done that numerous times. But, back to your question, I do think that if you're going to consider doing fractional work, you have two choices. You either A, do it because you want to do that as a segue into you land your full-time regular job, or you may want to do it because, you know what, maybe I don't want to go back to being a W-2 employee anymore. And I really like this. I like having the freedom of, calling my all hours. I don't have any problem working long hours or working really hard, but then there's a time there could be some lulls for me, or maybe I'm going to hustle Monday to Thursday. And Fridays during the summer, I'm going to take a half a day or a day just to myself and spend time with my family and do something really fun. And if I was in a regular full-time job, I couldn't do that. So I do think that the mindset has to change, and you have to look at it as, what does this offer? And I will personalize this just for a minute. I don't know what the future ever will hold for me, but I could tell you that I have done fractional work as a senior HR leader with startup companies for a couple of years, found it very rewarding, and been offered regular full-time jobs just because I had the opportunity to make an impact and create great relationships with the CEO and the people that I work with. But I've also now, after 27, 28 years, have came to the conclusion that I wanted to be in a role where I could be still a chief people officer supporting a company, but also doing fractional HR work for the clients of their company, which gave me the opportunity to have tremendous diversity. And I view that as a non-traditional now HR role. For me, at this time of my life, at this time of my career, for me, that is very rewarding. I don't know what the future holds, but that's what has made me very satisfied and very fulfilling at this point in my career. So I do think that it's really important that you be less reactionary and more proactive, and think about, what do I want to get out of this? Like, what am I looking to do? And then I have one other suggestion. When you're in transition, or you're looking to consider making a change of job, even if you're fully employed, engaged, and I've been very successful in doing this, we all work with vendors in our career. And what you do is you take the vendor relationships that you've worked really hard to build good relationships with, and now you turn them into potential employers to do fractional work. That's what I've done. Every vendor that I've ever worked with over the last 10 or 15 years, I stay in touch with, even when not working with them, and say, hey, by the way, I'm thinking about making a change, blah, blah, blah. Are you interested in doing, I'm interested in doing HR fractional work. This is the kind of stuff, this is kind of like the summary of what I'll be doing. Is that particularly of interest to you? Yeah, Giles, that sounds really great. Or maybe not now, but in 6 months from now, because we're scaling, Tony, I think that could be a possibility. So I think what's happened is that people have contacts right under their nose that they're not utilizing, because it doesn't even come across their mind to think, like, who can I tap into? And your vendors that you partner with are excellent sources of employers going forward.
I love that. I love that. And Tony, just on top of that, a lot of professionals that have been, they're further along in their career, 10, 20 plus years in their career, they've developed a network. Do you have a system for really staying in touch with the key folks in your network? Like, do you have the equivalent of a CRM? How do you do that? How do you manage that?
That's a really good question. I have to tell you that I don't think that I've been as sophisticated as I probably should. I do it more through regular communication. I use LinkedIn as my CRM. I'm constantly in touch with people. And by the way, they're also constantly in touch with me.
Yeah.
I do think LinkedIn is a great way to brand yourself, as long as you don't overbrand yourself and make it appear like you're doing things self-serving. So I come from a place of, I believe in doing postings. If I'm not recruiting, and often I spend a lot of time recruiting, or I'm doing strategies, I try to share things off my LinkedIn profile that'll be particularly interesting to other people. Like, it could be, is there a new legal nuance, or has something changed in terms of a new strategy from an AI perspective? Or, hey, there's a conference that maybe several people may be interested in. It's not that I'm selling. I'm doing just the opposite. I'm just sharing information. And I always find it really gratifying, because when you see how many people are looking at your profile and are commenting on your profile after you send something out, that is very, very gratifying. And one of the things that is a turnoff for a lot of people is if all they're talking about is, I've been recognized for this, and I've been recognized for that, and I've been recognized. No, don't get me wrong. Everybody's happy for everybody. And I think that there's a place for all that. But if that's exclusively what you're doing, and you're not sharing subject matter information that could benefit the masses in terms of what's happening in the workforce or what's happening in the world, people are interested in looking at that because they think you have an interesting comment or voice, and they will gravitate to your profile. So for me, that's how I'd stay in touch with people. And I always enjoy that.
Yeah, leading with value, right?
Leading with value. That's exactly right. And less about yourself and more about what's happening to everybody else.
Yeah. And then when you lead with value, that becomes sort of it becomes associated with your professional, personal brand, right? And that feels like, building your professional and personal brand is something that is, you have to do that, as you consider transitioning into more fractional work, because it feels like the job search when you're doing fractional work is something that's more sustained versus when you're in W-2, when you're in transition, you might spike for a few months or whatnot. And then once you get into your next W-2 position, you're not networking anymore. You're not, putting yourself out there anymore, right? Until you're looking for your next transition. So it feels like that's maybe one of the differences between sort of just sustained W-2 work versus, having a pipeline of fractional kinds of business. So
you're absolutely right. So to your point, everybody should be networking 24/7.
yeah,
Doesn't matter if you've landed your next W-2 position, because what happens is psychologically you become complacent. It's not a bad thing that you feel good about your new job and you like it. That's okay. What are you doing to inspire yourself? Are you going for certifications? Are you taking classes? Are you going to conferences? Are you going to other networking meetings? You have to stay fresh. And I think people, as I said, I think it's human reaction. And I've been in that position 2 years ago. We all have a tendency to get a little complacent, and then you stop doing all the things that helped you get to where you at. I will also just add one other thing, Eric, if I may, because I do think this is important because I see this happening. Two things are happening in the market, and I want to maybe caution people about this.
yeah,
One area is there are scams that are happening. People are preying on people in transition because they know people are desperate to land jobs. So first of all, and it's happened to me, but it's kind of like, it's like a freight train coming at you. You know, this is a scam only because I have the expertise and it happens to be something that I do see. But there are people that are coming up with fictitious names, reaching out to people and saying, hey, love your background. Your experience seems like a really good for one of my clients. And I'd love for you to be able to send me your resume. Well, most people, if they get that kind of a note, are going to feel very flattered, like, this is kind of interesting. But let me tell you what happens next. You send the resume, and then they're going to come back and they're going to say, by the way, your resume is not ATS friendly. I'm going to refer you to this organization that's going to help you get your resume ATS friendly. So once the person have gone that far, one, their resume is not going to be updated or changed. And two, there is no opportunity. This has happened to thousands of people. So I caution people to be very careful. And one of the things you should do is that if you get an email like that, go to Google. Don't go on first of all, go on LinkedIn and see first, and well, does the person exist? Sometimes the name may be a legit name, but that person didn't actually send it. Go on to Google and look the person up and look up the firm, if you will, that supposedly they're working for, and you will find it doesn't exist. So I have caught some people in scams and told them never to contact me again. And I've also cautioned a couple of my friends that if you ever get an email from this person, whatever, they're not legit, it doesn't exist. The second piece is, this is legit, but you have to be careful. So there are some people who are in transition who've decided that they want to be a coach. Everybody is a coach now. Everybody's a coach. They don't have any expertise coaching. And what it does is it dilutes the whole impact that true executive coaches that have been doing it for years, whether it's resume review, coaching, management development, whatever it is, it dilutes the significance and impact of what those people have been doing because they've been doing it for years and they've been certified and then whatever. And then other people are coming along like, okay, I'm going to be a coach now. And then they take people's money and it doesn't go anywhere. Not because they're not legit and literally trying to help the individuals, but it doesn't go anywhere. So if you're going to pick somebody to do executive coaching with you, do research, check them out, ask them for testimonials. Who have they done this with? What is their success rate like? If anybody tells you that I'm going to guarantee you're going to get a new job in 6 months after you work with me, they're just full of it.
You got to be careful out there.
You have to be very careful. So
discerning.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I wanted to share those two pieces with you.
I appreciate it. It's very practical advice, Tony. Any other advice for either the leaders, company leaders, or folks that are in transition right now, before, as we wrap up here?
I would say from company leaders, be open-minded. There are a lot of folks that are in transition. Being out of work is not leprosy, which means that they should be considered. I recognize that if people are in transition, there's always a tendency, well, if they were laid off, they may not be the best of the cream of the crop. I don't think that that's the case anymore, certainly. And I think people are in transition because they've been laid off. They've been caught up in fiscal situations that's, obviously beyond their controls. I think people need to be very open-minded. Secondly, I do think that for the organizations that are saying things like, they must have this specific industry to be able to work in our company is a very myopic perspective. Most industries, most people can transfer their skills into different industries. Yes, it's always nice to have somebody that comes from that industry, makes the transition a little bit easy, but they still have to learn that culture any way you slice the dice.
Yeah.
And then last, on the candidate side, it's very hard to be positive when I know you've been banging on the doors for quite a bit of time. So you have to change the narrative. So get out of your house, go volunteer, create new relationships with people, do networking, whether it's online or in person, and do something that is inspiring to you. And instead of using this as a hardship time for you, use this as a time for learnings, for time to spend with your family that you probably may not have had if you were in your full-time position, because we all say things like, gee, I wish we had more time to go here or there or do this or that, or more time with my kids or whatever. Well, guess what? This is your time. Take advantage of it.
That's right. I love that, Tony. Thank you so much for that. Where can folks in our audience connect with you?
Sure. So by all means, I'm on LinkedIn. Again, Tony Perlingieri. I currently work as the Chief People Officer for a company called Trident Benefits. We are one of the top 50 benefit insurance brokers in the country. And we focus on benefits, HR consulting, and payroll services. But anybody who needs advice or even fractional HR work that is interested in what I've had to say or want to be able to work with me, or any help that I can offer to somebody else, that would be the best way to be able to reach me.
All right. And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate your time. And I've walked away with I took a bunch of notes here. I walked away with a lot of gems here. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I've added value today to this webcast. And I'm hoping for anybody that happens to listen to the many things that we've covered today, I hope it adds value to all of them. If there is anybody that really needs help or wants partnership, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and be happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye now.